He is the difference maker. Derrick White came up and was huge in this game 4 win for the Boston Celtics versus the Miami Heat. The hot hand continued from game 3, 102 to 88. The Boston Celtics get that victory. And now the Heat are on their heels. Going to Boston 3-1, the Celtics will look to close out this series. And we're going to be breaking down all of this alongside our co-host Houston over from Heat Digest. And as we dive in on this game, obviously, it's not the greatest look for Houston. Obviously, going down 3-1, heading back to Boston. But I want to get kind of Houston's opinions, his thoughts going into this. So, Houston, what are your kind of thoughts and opinions breaking down this game so far?
If there was any game that Miami Heat absolutely had to win, it was this game tonight. Not only because with this loss we fall down 3-1 to the Boston Celtics that are obviously so good on the offensive end and really just so good overall, but now we're going back to Boston and Boston wasn't great tonight. It's just the Miami Heat really just could not get the job done, especially early when they produced good open looks. They just could not capitalize. And it felt like once that started, it was just a snowball effect. And we obviously we'll get to it in just a minute. But Derrick White was I don't even know. He thought he was the new generation of like Michael Jordan or something. It was just something special to watch from Derrick White tonight.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of the Celtics fans were definitely pissed off at the fact that he was left off that top 100 list, getting disrespected. And I know that he was around the All Star bid. A lot of people like Reggie Miller were saying he deserved to be an All Star for his great two-way play. And a lot of fans from other fan bases were, oh, a role player. He doesn't deserve it. He's not that guy to step up. But clearly tonight you can see him being that translating player. And even though I agreed with those fans, he didn't have the name value to get into that All Star game, his stats were definitely showing of it. But if we want to look at the stats from this game here, as we can see, you mentioned the Celtics didn't really have it from the offensive standpoint tonight. They shot around the same from the field goal percentage like the Heat did. Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown not being the most effective offensively, but where it came down again, the three-point shooting, the Heat 9 for 33 from the three-point range, shooting a 28%. The Celtics shooting a 10% better from them, and also hitting their free throws. The free throws being a little bit of a discrepancy early on. The Celtics had 10 free throws before the Miami Heat even took one, and I know that Houston, you'll definitely want to break down that when we get into that kind of section. But the rebounds the Celtics outdid, which was huge. The turnovers, again, the Celtics had less turnovers and more points off the turnover. The Heat obviously dominating with points in the paint, but as we all know with this style of basketball, threes are better than twos. So if the Celtics are able to hit those threes, be able to hit them at a consistent rate, especially with Derrick White heating up in the first quarter and continuing that momentum throughout the game, it's very, very hard for this Heat team to kind of crawl back in and get into it. So like I mentioned, we want to talk about the free throws. We kind of want to break that down. Houston, before we got into this video, we were kind of talking about that. What were your kind of thoughts? Because the officiating in this game was a big question mark from both sides of the field. I know that there were some calls that you weren't happy about, some calls I wasn't happy about. So let's get into that right here.
Overall, I 100% agree. It felt like there was times when it felt like Boston could have went to the free throw line, especially Jaylen Brown, as he was really, really aggressive tonight, at least going to the basket. It felt like he did not settle for a lot of jump shots tonight. And then for the Miami Heat, it again, I think you said the Boston Celtics had 10 attempted free throws before the Miami Heat even attempted their first one tonight. That is not going to get it done, especially when your 3-point shot is not falling, especially at the rate that the Miami Heat were shooting it at tonight. So the free throw discrepancy is not great. Obviously, I'm not saying that it was being like pushed for the Celtics in any way. I'm not saying that in any facet. I'm just saying there was definitely a discrepancy, and it was felt because the Miami Heat. We mentioned this in after I believe the game one or two, a video where it felt like the Miami Heat had to do something to stop the Boston Celtics, and they weren't going to be able to just physically stop them from scoring the basketball, but to be able to slow down the Celtics, be able to stop at least the game in the sense of getting to the free throw line, letting everyone take a breath, relax, recollect themselves, understand that we're getting into this set or falling back into this defensive presence after this made or missed free throw. And that obviously did not happen tonight, at least not until a good portion of the game had already gone through. And it was felt. Obviously, the Miami Heat weren't hitting shots like they really needed to, despite the Boston Celtics not really playing the high level defense that we saw even in the last game or in game one, where the Miami Heat didn't get a lot of open or really clear shots at the basket. Tonight, that wasn't the case. The defensive energy for the Boston Celtics really didn't translate, at least from game to game, at least at the highest level that we've seen it at. And because of that, it seemed like we were getting open shots. We were settling for a lot of jump shots. We just didn't make a lot of them. So Yes, we didn't shoot a lot of free throws, but I think it was because we weren't being as aggressive going towards the basket. We were just settling for a lot of jump shots that just didn't result in makes.
Like you mentioned, game two, the Heat were able to slow down that Celtics offense, really let them to set up their offense, and allowed the Heat to kind of get into that game. And obviously, they were hitting their threes. We kind of saw that similar kind of play style in game four tonight with the Heat getting a lot more open looks. The Celtics wouldn't say we're playing a little bit lazy defense, but I would say weren't closing out as hard as they were in game three, especially after that game two performance where the Heat were hitting all those wide open threes. But like you mentioned, it was a very physical game, both teams going back at it, and this series has been physical throughout. But the main man that we want to mention over here on this Celtics team tonight was Derrick White. He was absolutely fantastic. 15 for 26 from the field goal, 8 for 15 from three-point range with 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks, and 38 career points. This man took this Celtics team and put it on his back. Jayson Tatum helped with the intangibles, getting 11 rebounds, 5 assists. Jaylen Brown played some solid defense, but not the greatest shooting nights, not the greatest efficiency nights from those guys from the bench. Horford stepped up with the KP injury, which we'll get into a little bit in the second half. But Derrick White started off hot in the first quarter, that hot hand, hitting those threes, getting those layups. He even had 2 emphatic dunks in the second half, getting over Nikola Jovic and Caleb Martin and throwing one down on Bam Adebayo. And if we want to look at this stat here, Derrick White was the player of the game. 38 points, 8 threes, and 3 blocks, which has only happened, I believe when we were talking before this video started, 3 times in NBA history with Derrick White, Tracy McGrady, or Vince Carter, excuse me, and I do think I'm blanking on the
Damian
last one.
Lillard.
Damian Lillard, yes. But those
Yep.
3 are the only 3 players to do that. And you did mention that Derrick White is having an efficient shooting night in the playoffs,
Yeah.
50, 40, 90 with averaging 20 points. The only 3 players in this playoffs that are doing that are Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Derrick White. So he's in that elite company with all of these elite guards. And like we mentioned in the beginning, people are saying just because he's a Derrick White, he's a role player, he's not that type of guy. But stepping up and being a huge third scorer for the Boston Celtics definitely did them work. So for the Heat, what are your kind of game plans to kind of minimize Derrick White here? Because that's obviously was the big catalyst for this game here for the Celtics. Because if he doesn't go off, this game is a lot closer, and we actually probably get to see our first game that's a 5 to 8 point game swing.
Yeah, so a few things. First thing with Derrick White, that kid could start on any team in the NBA right now. He could start on Denver's team and he'd fit in great. He could start in Minnesota, LA, either LA team, Dallas. I'm not kidding. He could start on basically any team in the NBA right now, and he would be a great player for anyone he played for. Tonight was just a prime example of it. He had great energy coming out of the gate, and he lit the fuse for the Boston Celtics, despite there was a stat, and I don't want to butcher the percentage, but you guys were shooting like 9 of 28. Like everyone besides Derrick White tonight in like the first half or something was shooting like 9 of 28 or some really poor percentage, but you guys were still up like 15 points because Derrick White, he literally couldn't miss. It felt like the Jaylen Brown stretch. I believe it was in game 2 where he made like 3 in a row, and then the fourth one he took another heat check after he made his third one. It was that type of night. There was a shot early in the first half on the left wing where Derrick White had the ball. He kind of fumbled with his dribble, late shot clock. He had to put something up. It looked like he was damn near in the front row seats, and he shot it, and he was nothing but nylon. It was absolutely demoralizing. It kind of felt like at that point it was just going to be one of those nights. And thankfully, it was only the Derrick White show tonight. And Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and everyone else on this Boston Celtic team really didn't get the ball going, thankfully, because it would have been even worse than it was tonight. We did make it a little bit closer, thankfully, towards the end. But Derrick White, man, that kid is a problem. And if the rest of this Boston Celtic team gets going with someone like Derrick White, who doesn't have the name or really the aura, if you will, around him when he steps on the basketball court, this team is just even more scary. It's just even scarier. But for your actual question, what do the Miami Heat have to do? We talked about this after game 3. It was like pick your poison, minimize one guy, which was Porzingis, in my opinion. And that happened tonight as Porzingis did go down with injury. I don't think it's anything significant, thankfully. You don't want to see anyone get injured, regardless of the team they play for. But he was minimized. You can't really minimize him any more than that. Jayson Tatum got in foul trouble kind of early in this game, kind of what I called for in the last video, too. And it was totally negated because Derrick White just he had a Steph Curry impression tonight, and it worked. And it was not fun to watch from the Miami Heat standpoint. But when this Boston Celtic team is really clicking the way they can, man, you guys are fun to watch, but you're scary to play against. You guys can stretch the floor so effectively. And when you do, it's not like we're stretching the floor. It's like we're stretching the floor and we're gonna keep you honest because we're gonna make threes and we're gonna shoot them more a higher rate than you guys will. And if we're making them, we're gonna run you out of the gym. And thankfully tonight that was not the case. It wasn't a 30-point loss for the Miami Heat. But again, what are we going to do going forward? I don't know. I really don't. We came out in zone tonight after we got torched in game 3. It wasn't as bad, but again, you guys were still able to capitalize with players like Derrick White hitting the shots they did.
Exactly. And Derrick White really being that fourth scorer for this team really needs to step up now with that Kristaps Porzingis injury and how we look at it.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, Kristaps was not the greatest for the Boston Celtics tonight in our matchup. 1 for 5 from the field, 1 for 3, 4 for 4 from the free throw with 3 rebounds. But again, he did go down in the first half, did not come back, and he is going to be out with a calf injury. For a little bit of an update here from Adrian Wojnarowski, this came throughout the game where center Kristaps Porzingis' right calf will undergo imaging on Tuesday, but early indications are that he has not sustained an Achilles injury, which is the good news. Obviously, the calf strain, obviously don't want to see it. Throughout the season, he had a calf strain, had a hamstring injury. Both of those injuries, he was out 7 games, out 8 games. So preparing for these next couple of series, it won't be that great. But in my honest opinion, if we can get through this game 5, get him that rest, especially if Cleveland, Orlando is really, really close, go to 7 games, Kristaps Porzingis could hopefully come back towards the end of that series, and we desperately need him for the Eastern Conference Finals and for the finals if the Celtics do make it. But obviously a big blow, as you know, he was the solution for us in game 1, was that big difference maker, that guy who eliminates Bam Adebayo on the defensive side. So Houston, like we talked about with Kristaps Porzingis now being out, what are some adjustments again for the Heat with, you know, Bam Adebayo being that free safety defender? Do we think that it's going to be a little bit easier for the Heat to play defense, because we saw them in the second half be very, very solid on that side?
It's going to be interesting. I think we're still going to switch everything,
Mm-hmm.
especially without Porzingis. I will say tonight we did a hell of a job, and I know it's hard to say that in a game that you lost, and we didn't really make it that competitive throughout the entirety of the game. But we really did a good job, excuse me, when Porzingis caught the ball, whether it be at the 3-point line or inside at the free throw line, if not the free throw line extended. Regardless if it was Tyler Hero, Caleb Martin, Bam Adebayo, it really didn't matter. We made his life very difficult when he shot those shots. There was a lot of times. There was a one time explicitly where he caught the ball in the first half at the free throw line, if not just a step inside. And despite like 3 really good head fakes and ball fakes and fake passes out to the outside, Caleb Martin sat on those. He did not leave his feet and resulted in a really tough shot for Porzingis that really kind of felt forced. Seemed like he should have shot the first shot. But overall, you guys are very, very lucky and fortunate that it is only a calf strain. I will say that because it did not look like that when it first happened. That was a terrifying looking injury. It was non-contact. We see a lot of that in football. Like that is usually always looks like an Achilles injury. We do not want to see that, obviously, because no one wants to go down with that type of injury. You miss a whole lot of time and then it sets your career back. But again, what are we going to do defensively? Horford is going to get the starts, obviously, and then you guys will have what's your backup center's name?
Luke
Starts with a
Kornet will
K.
be running. Yeah.
Yep. He'll be coming in off the bench. He'll probably play a hell of a lot more minutes than we're accustomed to seeing him play, which is good for the Miami Heat because obviously he's not on the level of someone of Horford or Porzingis' level. So that would be good for the Miami Heat. But again, we're going to switch everything. I wouldn't be surprised if we played zone again. I don't think it'll be as useful as we've seen in or the game 1 and 2. So yes, we'll play zone. A lot of switching. And I think that Bam does play that kind of roaming guy. I think he gets a lot of possessions on not only Tatum, but even Brown and Horford. I think he's going to be all over the place in game 5 as we are going to have to limit the big guys. Because if Tatum gets off and then he allows everyone else to really get the ball going because of all the attention he demands, it's going to be a long night. So I think Bam comes out. He might even start on Tatum if it's not Caleb Martin. I know Jaime Jaquez Jr. may be dealing with a right leg injury, so we'll lose a key defender there if if he's not ready to go for game 5 in what is that on Wednesday. So it's going to be interesting. I really don't know what everything is going to look like because if we don't have Jaquez, he's a key defender. He's played great defense, especially over this series on people like Tatum and Brown. So big question marks, but expect a lot of switching and a lot of man coverage from this Miami Heat team.
like you mentioned, now that we only have a 2-game stretch now, the last couple games
Yeah.
we've had 2 days off. Now we're back to that 1 day off going back into it. So the injuries with Jaquez, the injuries with Kristaps, they're going to have to be mentored. They're going to have to be, locked down so that they don't injure themselves or hurt themselves even more trying to extend the series or, solidify this series for either team. But as we all know, the Celtics got this big dub, taking this 3-1 series lead versus the Miami Heat with a fantastic Derrick White performance here. The Celtics will be going back to Boston on Wednesday night to solidify and try to wrap up the series 4-1 and get the gentleman's sweep. But Houston's Heat are not going to shy away quietly. They're going to come out ferociously. They're going to try to get their job done, led by Bam Adebayo and Tyler here. So it will be an exciting game. We'll have another post-game breaking that down for you guys. So if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit that like button so you guys can stay tuned to all the Celtics content, and check out Houston over on the Heat Digest. He does a fantastic job breaking down the Miami Heat. Without further ado, thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode as we wrap it up over on Celtics Digest. I'm Bruce Veliz with my co-host Houston Cullman. We'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out, everybody. Have a good one.